The mysterious encounter. Alex stared at the cracked screen of his navigation console, his heart sinking as smoke curled from the edges of the shattered glass. His small exploration ship had crash-landed on an unknown planet after a sudden system failure. He stepped out into this strange world, his boots crunching against an alien terrain of glowing blue moss and jagged black rocks. The sky above was a swirling mix of green and orange, with two suns casting long, strange shadows. A faint hum seemed to vibrate through the air, as though the planet itself was alive. Alex tightened his grip on the survival pack, slung over his shoulder, and scanned his surroundings cautiously. The eerie silence felt oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of bubbling water. As he moved forward, Alex noticed something unusual. Tiny, delicate footprints pressed into the glowing moss. They were far smaller than any human footprint and seemed to head toward a cluster of crystal formations glimmering in the distance. His curiosity piqued. Alex followed the trail, his mind racing with questions. Who, or what, had left these tracks? He approached the crystal formations slowly, crouching low to avoid making noise. The crystals towered above him, emitting a faint, pulsating light. Then he saw her. A tiny figure, no more than 2 feet tall, crouched behind one of the crystals. Her skin was a pale lavender shade, almost translucent, and her large, almond-shaped eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. She had delicate, pointed ears, and her silvery hair shimmered like threads of moonlight. She clutched a jagged piece of metal in her small hands, holding it like a weapon. Alex froze. He didn't want to scare her, but it was clear she was already terrified. The alien girl's wide eyes darted back and forth, searching for an escape route. She trembled visibly, her small body pressed tightly against the crystal. "Hey," Alex said softly, raising his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The alien girl didn't move. Her eyes narrowed, and she tightened her grip on the metal shard. Alex took a slow step back, giving her space. "You're afraid of me," he realized aloud. The words felt strange. In his years of space exploration, he had never encountered a creature that seemed so vulnerable and so scared of him. The girl didn't respond, but her body language confirmed his suspicion. Alex lowered himself to the ground, sitting cross-legged to appear less intimidating. He opened his survival pack slowly, pulling out a small, sealed packet of food. "Are you hungry?" he asked, holding it out to her. She tilted her head, her eyes filled with suspicion. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, cautiously, she inched closer, her movements quick and jittery, like a frightened animal. When she was just a few feet away, she snatched the packet from his hand and retreated back to her hiding spot. Alex watched as she tore into the packet with surprising efficiency, devouring the contents in seconds. As she ate, her eyes flicked back to him repeatedly, as if she expected him to attack at any moment. "What happened to you?" Alex asked gently. He wasn't sure if she could understand him, but he hoped his tone conveyed his curiosity and concern. The alien girl hesitated, then picked up a small stick from the ground. She began drawing in the dirt, her movements quick and deliberate. Alex leaned closer, fascinated. Her drawings were crude but clear. She sketched a group of small figures, like herself, huddled together. Then she added larger figures, tall, imposing shapes with angular features. One of the tall figures reached out, and the smaller ones scattered, their lines jagged and chaotic. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "You were attacked," he murmured. The alien girl didn't respond, but her hand paused, the stick trembling slightly. Alex's chest tightened with a mix of guilt and anger. Was it possible that humans were responsible for this? Had someone from his species harmed her people? "I'm not like them," Alex said firmly. "I promise, I'm here to help." The girl stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Alex thought she might run away. But then she did something unexpected. She reached out with her tiny hand and placed the stick on the ground between them. It felt like a small gesture of trust, a tentative step toward understanding. Alex smiled faintly. "Thank you," he said. The alien girl didn't smile back, but she didn't move away either. For now, that was enough. As the two sat in the shadow of the glowing crystals, Alex's mind raced with possibilities. Who were the tall figures in her drawing? What had they done to make her so afraid? And most importantly, how could he help her without causing more harm? The hum in the air grew louder, almost like a warning. Alex knew one thing for certain. This planet held secrets, and he had only scratched the surface. A fragile connection. The alien girl, now sitting a safe distance away from Alex, kept her wide, glowing eyes locked on him. Her distrust was evident in the way she held her small body, always ready to spring into action if she sensed danger. Alex didn't blame her. The fear etched into her every movement was something learned through harsh experience. Determined to ease her fears, Alex rummaged through his survival pack. He found a small handheld projector that displayed simple images. It was meant for quick communication in unknown languages, but Alex figured it might help bridge the gap between them. He activated the device, and a hologram of Earth's solar system flickered into view. "This is where I'm from," Alex said, pointing to the third planet from the sun. The alien girl tilted her head, curiosity briefly overcoming her caution. Her glowing eyes darted between Alex and the hologram, as if trying to decipher its meaning. Encouraged by her interest, Alex pressed a few buttons on the device, cycling through images of Earth's landscapes. Vast oceans, dense forests, and towering mountains. The alien girl's expression softened slightly. She traced a small finger in the air, mimicking the shapes of the holograms. For the first time, she seemed less like a frightened child and more like an inquisitive being, eager to understand. Alex smiled. "You've never seen anything like this, have you?" Her gaze snapped back to him, and her body tensed again. It was as though she realized she'd let her guard down for a moment too long. She scurried back a few steps, clutching the shard of metal that served as her weapon. Alex sighed inwardly, knowing trust wouldn't come easily. But then she surprised him. Tentatively, she pointed to the hologram, and then to herself. Her small hands gestured in what Alex assumed was a question. "You want to show me where you're from," he guessed. He tapped the projector, flipping through planetary systems until the girl's eyes widened. She pointed excitedly at an unfamiliar star cluster, her gestures becoming more animated. "That's your home," Alex murmured, feeling a pang of sorrow. The way she clung to the image suggested a longing, a deep connection to a place she might never see again. He wondered what had brought her to this desolate planet. Was she stranded, just like him? Or had she been fleeing something far worse? The girl began drawing in the dirt again, her stick moving swiftly as she created a crude map of her world. She added small symbols, possibly representing cities or landmarks. But as she drew, her expression darkened. Her hand hesitated, then slowly sketched several large, jagged shapes encircling the smaller symbols. Alex recognized the fear in her eyes as she glanced at him, waiting to see if he understood. "They destroyed your home, didn't they?" Alex asked softly. She didn't respond, but her silence spoke volumes. Her hand clenched around the stick, snapping it in two. Alex felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at whatever had caused her this pain. He didn't know the full story yet, but he was certain of one thing. This tiny alien girl had been through unimaginable trauma. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice gentle. "I don't know who hurt you, but I'm not like them. I swear." The girl's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing the truth of his words. She set aside the broken stick and reached into a small pouch tied to her waist. From it, she pulled a small glowing crystal. She held it out toward Alex, her movements cautious but deliberate. "What's this?" he asked, taking the crystal from her outstretched hand. The moment it touched his skin, he felt a faint vibration, like a heartbeat. The crystal seemed alive, pulsing with a faint, soothing warmth. The alien girl gestured for him to hold it closer. When he did, a series of images flashed through his mind. A lush green planet with twin moons, skies filled with birds that shimmered like liquid silver, and a sprawling city carved into the side of a massive cliff. It was beautiful, breathtaking even, but the vision quickly shifted. The skies darkened, and enormous shadowy figures descended from above. Fire consumed the city, and screams echoed in Alex's mind before the vision abruptly ended. Alex gasped, nearly dropping the crystal. His hands trembled as he looked at the girl. "That was your home, wasn't it?" She nodded, her expression heavy with sorrow. Alex realized the crystal wasn't just a relic of her past. It was a fragment of her people's memory, a way to preserve what had been lost. The girl pointed to the crystal, then to Alex, and mind placing it near his heart. Her meaning was clear. She wanted him to keep it, to carry the story of her world with him. Alex hesitated. This was clearly a sacred object, something deeply personal to her. But the determined look in her eyes left no room for argument. "I'll keep it safe," Alex promised, tucking the crystal into his survival pack. "I'll make sure no one forgets what happened to your people." For the first time, the girl's tense posture softened. It wasn't quite trust, but it was a step closer. As they sat in the fading light of the planet's twin suns, Alex knew one thing for certain. He couldn't abandon her. Whatever dangers lay ahead, he would face them, because no one, human or alien, deserved to face them alone. Zia's hidden world. As the twin suns dipped below the jagged horizon, casting long shadows over the glowing moss, the alien girl motioned for Alex to follow her. She moved with quick, deliberate steps, glancing back occasionally to ensure he wasn't lagging. Though her body language was still cautious, there was a noticeable shift. She no longer seemed as afraid of him. Alex adjusted his survival pack and fell into step behind her. He hadn't learned her name yet, but he felt an unspoken understanding beginning to grow between them. The crystal she had entrusted to him pulsed faintly in his pack, a reminder of the weight of her story and the responsibility he now carried. The girl led him through a dense patch of alien foliage, its translucent leaves glowing softly in the dim light. Alex ducked under low-hanging vines and carefully avoided stepping on fragile-looking plants that shimmered with bioluminescent hues. The air grew cooler, and the faint hum he'd noticed earlier grew louder, resonating like a heartbeat beneath his feet. "Where are we going?" Alex asked, his voice low. He didn't expect an answer, but hoped she might offer some sign of reassurance. She didn't respond, but after several minutes of navigating the alien landscape, they arrived at what appeared to be a large, moss-covered rock face. At first glance, it seemed like a dead end, but the girl pressed her small hand against a section of the rock. A faint light rippled outward, and a hidden doorway slid open with a soft hiss. Alex stared in awe as the girl motioned for him to enter. "You've been hiding here this whole time?" he asked, stepping through the threshold. The interior was dimly lit, illuminated by strands of glowing crystal embedded in the walls. The space was larger than Alex had expected, with tunnels branching off in multiple directions. He followed the girl down a narrow passage, his boots echoing softly against the smooth stone floor. As they emerged into a central chamber, Alex's breath caught in his throat. The room was filled with others like her, tiny, lavender-skinned beings with glowing eyes and silvery hair. They froze at the sight of him, their wide eyes filled with fear and suspicion. Mothers pulled their children close, and a few older aliens stepped forward, brandishing makeshift weapons. The girl raised her hands and spoke in her high-pitched, melodic language. Her words came quickly, her tone firm but soothing. Alex couldn't understand her, but he recognized the way she glanced at him, gesturing with urgency. She was vouching for him, trying to convince them that he wasn't a threat. The tension in the room remained thick, but the older aliens eventually lowered their weapons, though their eyes never left Alex. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace and offered a small nod. "I mean no harm," he said, even though he knew they couldn't understand him. The girl tugged at his sleeve, guiding him further into the chamber. Alex's attention was drawn to the walls, where intricate carvings and patterns told a story. He moved closer, studying the depictions. The carvings showed a thriving world, tall spires that reached into the sky, lush fields filled with strange but beautiful plants, and a society that seemed peaceful and advanced. But the scenes grew darker as he moved along the wall. Large, shadowy figures appeared, descending from the skies. Fire consumed the spires, and the once thriving cities crumbled. They were attacked, Alex murmured, his mind flashing back to the images he'd seen through the crystal. This wasn't just a hidden refuge. It was the remnants of a civilization clinging to survival. The girl pulled him toward another part of the chamber, where damaged pieces of technology lay scattered. Some of the devices looked vaguely familiar, their designs reminiscent of advanced human tech. Others were completely alien, their purpose a mystery. "What is this?" Alex asked, crouching to examine a small device that buzzed faintly when he touched it. The girl pointed to the device, then gestured toward herself and the others. She spoke a single word, her voice soft, but filled with meaning. "Home." Alex's stomach twisted. These fragments weren't just tools, they were pieces of her people's history, the last remnants of a world that had been torn apart. He realized now why they were so afraid of him. If the attackers had used technology similar to his, it made sense that they would see him as a potential enemy. "I'm not like them," Alex said again, his voice steady. He turned to the girl, meeting her glowing eyes. "I'll help you, I promise." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. Then she pointed toward a passageway at the far end of the chamber. Her expression grew serious, and Alex felt the weight of her unspoken words. Whatever lay beyond that passage was important and dangerous. As they walked toward the tunnel, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something far larger than himself. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about understanding, redemption, and perhaps even justice for a people who had lost everything. The hum in the air grew louder as they descended into the depths of the hidden sanctuary. Alex tightened his grip on his pack, the crystal's warmth a steady reminder of the trust that had been placed in him. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let them face it alone. The attackers arrived. The air inside the sanctuary grew colder as Alex followed Zia. He had finally learned her name, deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels. Her small form moved swiftly and silently, her silver hair glinting faintly in the glow of the crystal-lined walls. The hum that had followed them earlier was now a constant vibration, resonating through Alex's chest like a warning drumbeat. Zia stopped suddenly and raised a hand, signaling Alex to halt. He froze, his ears straining for any sound beyond the hum. For a moment, the silence felt deafening, and then he heard it, a faint, metallic clicking noise, echoing faintly through the tunnels. "What is that?" Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. Zia didn't answer. Instead, she crouched low, her glowing eyes scanning the shadows ahead. The clicking grew louder, sharper, and was soon accompanied by a low, mechanical whirring sound. Alex felt his pulse quicken as he glanced back toward the main chamber, where the others were gathered. "Stay here," he said softly, but Zia grabbed his arm, shaking her head furiously. She pointed toward the ceiling, and Alex followed her gaze. Thin cracks had begun forming in the stone, faint streams of dust trickling down. The vibrations were getting stronger. Suddenly, a deafening crash shattered the tense quiet, and a section of the ceiling caved in. Alex shielded his face as debris rained down, the air filling with dust and the acrid stench of burning metal. When the smoke cleared, his heart sank. Standing in the rubble were two towering machines, their sleek, insect-like bodies glinting ominously in the dim light. Their legs, sharp and spindly, clicked against the stone as they moved. Their heads swiveled toward Alex and Zia, glowing red sensors locking onto them. "Harvesters," Zia whispered, her voice trembling. Alex's stomach churned. He had heard stories of harvesters, machines designed to strip resources from planets, often leaving nothing but desolation in their wake. But these machines weren't just here for resources. They were hunting. "Run," Alex shouted, grabbing Zaya's hand and pulling her down the tunnel. The harvesters let out a piercing screech, their legs moving with terrifying speed as they pursued them. The tunnels, once a haven, now felt like a maze of impending doom. The sound of the harvesters' pursuit echoed off the walls, growing louder with each passing second. Alex's mind raced. He couldn't lead them back to the main chamber. It would be a death sentence for Zia's people. As they ran, Alex spotted a narrow side tunnel partially obscured by a collapsed beam. "This way," he shouted, shoving the beam aside. He pushed Zia through first, then squeezed in after her, just as one of the harvester's sharp legs slashed at the air behind him. The side tunnel was barely wide enough for Alex to crawl through, but the harvester's large frames prevented them from following. Still, their shrill, metallic cries reverberated through the passage, a chilling reminder that they weren't far behind. "Zia, are you okay?" Alex asked, his voice strained as he crawled forward. She nodded, though her trembling hands betrayed her fear. She motioned for him to keep moving, her urgency clear. The tunnel eventually opened into a small chamber filled with what looked like abandoned machinery. Alex recognized some of the parts. They were remnants of old defensive systems, long since deactivated. "We can use this," Alex said, scanning the room for anything functional. His training as an explorer and engineer kicked in as he began piecing together a makeshift plan. Zia watched him work, her fear giving way to determination. She pointed out components, her gestures quick and precise. Despite the language barrier, Alex understood her intent. Together, they began rigging the abandoned equipment into a series of traps. The sound of the harvesters tearing through the tunnel grew louder. Alex worked faster, his hands moving with a desperation he hadn't felt in years. When he was done, he looked at Zia, his face grim. "This might not stop them, but it'll slow them down," he said. Zia nodded, her small hand gripping his sleeve. For the first time, her eyes didn't seem filled with fear. They held a glimmer of hope. The first harvester burst into the chamber moments later, its spindly legs crunching over the debris. Alex hit a switch, and a series of old plasma coils sprang to life, shooting arcs of energy toward the machine. The harvester screeched as its sensors overloaded, but it wasn't enough to bring it down. Come on," Alex muttered, watching the second harvester step into the chamber. Zia tugged on his arm, pointing toward an escape route on the far side of the room. "Go," Alex shouted, shoving her toward the passage. As they ran, the traps continued to slow the machines, but Alex knew it was only a matter of time before the harvesters adapted. He could feel the vibrations in the ground as the machines pursued them relentlessly. Finally, they emerged into a cavern lit by an underground lake. The shimmering water reflected the glow of the crystals embedded in the walls, creating an ethereal light. Zia pointed to a massive, dormant console near the water's edge. Alex recognized it as an ancient power source, likely left by her people before the harvesters attacked. "If we can activate that," Alex began, but his words were cut off as the harvesters burst into the cavern. "Stay behind me," he said, stepping in front of Zia. His hand hovered over the crystal in his pack, its faint pulse steadying him. He didn't know how they would survive this, but he was determined to protect her, and the fragile hope she represented. Alex's plan. The cavern trembled as the harvesters advanced, their towering forms cutting through the glow of the underground lake like shadows of impending doom. Alex tightened his grip on the survival pack, slung over his shoulder, his mind racing. The ancient console Zia had pointed to hummed faintly, its dormant power source hinting at untapped potential. If he could get it working, they might stand a chance. Zia tugged at his sleeve, her glowing eyes filled with urgency. She gestured toward the console, then mimed a motion that Alex understood immediately. She wanted him to activate it. "Buy me some time," he said, unsure if she understood. He pointed to himself, then to the console, and mimed typing. Zia nodded, darting toward a stack of debris that she began hurling toward the approaching machines. The harvesters didn't even flinch as the debris clattered off their metallic frames, but it was enough to slow their advance. Alex sprinted to the console and dropped to his knees, wiping away years of dust and grime. The alien interface was unlike anything he'd seen before, symbols and patterns that glowed faintly, shifting under his touch. Come on, Alex muttered, his fingers flying over the interface as he tried to decipher its purpose. The console emitted a low hum, but nothing else happened. Behind him, the harvesters let out shrill, piercing screeches as they closed the distance. Zia continued her valiant distraction, darting around the cavern and throwing anything she could find. Her movements were quick and clever, always staying just out of reach of the machine's sharp, spindly legs. Alex's frustration mounted as the console resisted his every attempt. He slammed his fist against it, and the impact caused a hidden panel to slide open, revealing a glowing crystal similar to the one in his pack. His eyes widened. This is the key, he realized. He yanked the crystal from his pack, its pulse growing stronger as he brought it closer to the console. The dormant crystal within the console flared to life, syncing with the one in his hand. The entire structure began to vibrate, emitting a deep, resonant tone that filled the cavern. The harvesters paused mid-step, their red sensors flickering erratically. Alex glanced over his shoulder, hope igniting in his chest. It's working. But the machines weren't stopped yet. One of them let out an enraged screech and lunged toward Alex, its sharp legs slicing through the air. "Alex!" Zia cried out, her voice high and panicked. Alex barely had time to react. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the harvester's strike. The machine's leg pierced the ground where he'd been moments before, sending cracks spidering across the cavern floor. "Keep it together," Alex muttered to himself, scrambling back to the console. The crystal was glowing brighter now, its energy coursing through the system. Symbols and patterns began to align on the screen, forming what looked like a defensive protocol. "Just a little more time," he whispered. Zia, realizing the machines were focused on Alex, sprang into action. She climbed onto a nearby ledge, her small frame agile and quick. From above, she hurled a heavy chunk of debris at the closest harvester, striking it squarely in the head. The machine staggered, its sensors flickering wildly. "Good job, Zia," Alex shouted, his fingers flying across the console. The defensive protocol was almost complete, but he needed to charge the system fully. He glanced at the shimmering lake, and an idea struck him. "Zia." "The water," he called, pointing to the lake. She hesitated for only a moment before understanding his plan. She dashed to the edge of the lake and began pushing a piece of metallic debris into the water. The moment the metal touched the surface, the lake lit up with energy, the glowing crystals embedded in the cavern walls resonating with the charge. The console roared to life. A blinding light shot from its core, spreading across the cavern in a wave of energy. The harvesters froze mid-step, their sensors flickering before shutting off completely. They collapsed to the ground in unison, their legs twitching uselessly. Alex fell back, breathing heavily as the cavern went quiet. The defensive system had worked, disabling the machines without destroying the fragile sanctuary. He turned to Zia, who was staring at him with a mixture of awe and relief. "We did it," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. Zia approached him slowly, her small hands trembling. She reached out and touched his arm, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude. In her language, she spoke a single word that Alex didn't understand, but its meaning was clear. "Thank you." As the two of them stood in the glow of the reactivated console, Alex knew the fight wasn't over. The harvesters were only part of a larger threat, and somewhere out there, more danger awaited. But for now, they had won a small, precious victory, and Alex was determined to protect it, no matter the cost. The battle for survival. The cavern was eerily quiet after the harvesters fell, their towering forms now lifeless heaps of metal. The faint hum of the console and the shimmer of the glowing crystals were the only signs of life. Alex leaned against the console, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Zaya sat beside him, her small frame trembling with exhaustion and relief. But the silence didn't last. A low, distant rumble began to echo through the tunnels, growing louder with each passing second. Alex's heart sank. "They're sending reinforcements," he muttered. Zaya's wide, glowing eyes darted to him, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. She stood and tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward the far side of the cavern. Alex followed her gaze to see another passageway, one that led deeper underground. "You want us to go deeper?" he asked, his voice uncertain. She nodded emphatically, her gestures urgent. Alex hesitated, glancing back at the console. If they left it unguarded, the reinforcements could destroy it and any hope of protecting her people. Before he could decide, the rumbling grew deafening, and the ground beneath them began to quake. The walls trembled, dislodging shards of glowing crystal that clattered to the floor. Alex grabbed Zaya's hand and nodded. "All right, let's go." The two of them sprinted toward the passageway as the cavern began to collapse around them. Behind them, the first of the reinforcements burst through the rubble, a massive harvester twice the size of the ones they'd just defeated. Its spindly legs clattered against the stone as it scanned the cavern, red sensors glowing ominously. Alex and Zaya barely made it into the tunnel before the harvester let out a piercing screech and gave chase. The narrow walls of the passage offered them some protection, but the machine's long, segmented legs clawed their way forward, scraping against the stone. As they ran, Zaya led Alex toward a hidden alcove. Inside, they found a cache of ancient weapons and tools, likely left behind by her people during their last stand. The weapons were alien in design, with sleek lines and glowing energy cores, but Alex could see their purpose immediately. "Perfect," he said, grabbing what looked like a compact energy rifle. He handed a smaller device to Zaya, who took it with steady hands. "We can't keep running. We have to fight." Zaya nodded, her fear replaced by resolve. The two of them took position at the entrance of the alcove, waiting for the harvester to come into view. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as the machine's glowing red sensors illuminated the tunnel ahead. It screeched and lunged forward, its sharp legs scraping against the stone walls. "Now," Alex shouted. They opened fire, the alien weapons unleashing beams of searing light that struck the harvester's metallic body. The machine staggered under the assault but didn't fall. Its segmented body twisted, and a sharp blade-like appendage shot out, narrowly missing Alex as he dove to the side. Zaya let out a cry and fired again, this time aiming for the glowing core on the machine's chest. The beam struck true, and the harvester let out a deafening screech as its core flickered and dimmed. Alex seized the opportunity, grabbing a grenade-like device from the cache and hurling it toward the machine. The explosion was deafening, sending shards of metal flying in all directions. When the smoke cleared, the harvester lay in pieces, its once ominous red glow extinguished. Alex and Zaya stood together, breathing heavily as they surveyed the wreckage. But their victory was short-lived. The rumble of more machines echoed through the tunnels, a relentless reminder that the fight was far from over. Alex turned to Zaya, determination hardening his features. "We can't keep fighting like this," he said. "We need to end it, for good." Zaya tilted her head, her expression questioning. Alex pointed back toward the cavern, where the console still hummed faintly. "That system, it's not just a defense. It's a beacon. If we can amplify its signal, we can call for help. Maybe someone out there will hear us." Zaya hesitated, then nodded. She motioned for Alex to follow her, leading him back through the tunnels. As they moved, The sounds of the reinforcements grew louder, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Alex knew they didn't have much time. When they reached the cavern, the console was still intact, but the reinforcements were close behind. Alex began working frantically, modifying the console's settings to amplify its signal. Zaya stood guard, her small frame steady as she fired at the approaching machines. Come on, Alex muttered, his fingers flying over the alien interface. The console's glow brightened, and the hum grew louder, resonating through the cavern. The first of the reinforcements burst into the cavern, a swarm of smaller, insect-like machines that moved with terrifying speed. Zaya fired at them, her aim precise, but there were too many. Alex grabbed one of the energy weapons and joined her, the two of them holding the line as the console's signal reached its peak. A deafening pulse of energy erupted from the console, spreading outward in a wave of light. The machines froze mid-attack, their sensors flickering before shutting down entirely. The pulse continued, spreading beyond the cavern and into the tunnels, disabling every machine it touched. When the light finally faded, the cavern was silent. Alex and Zaya stood together, surrounded by the lifeless remains of the harvesters. The console emitted a steady, calming hum, its beacon now active and sending a signal out into the void. Alex turned to Zia, a tired but triumphant smile on his face. Now we wait, he said. Zia nodded, her glowing eyes filled with hope. For the first time, the weight of fear seemed to lift from her small frame. Together, they had fought for survival, and won a chance to change the future. Trust restored. The cavern was silent except for the low hum of the activated console. The glow of the crystals lining the walls bathed Alex and Zaya in soft, shimmering light. Around them lay the remains of the defeated harvesters, their once intimidating forms now lifeless piles of metal. Despite the victory, Alex's heart was heavy with the weight of what they had endured, and what was still uncertain. The signal from the console was now pulsing steadily, sending its message far into the cosmos. Alex leaned against the console, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. Zaya sat beside him, her small frame slumped in exhaustion. Her silvery hair clung to her face, damp with sweat, but her glowing eyes still held a spark of hope. "We did it," Alex said, breaking the silence. "Now we just have to hope someone hears us." Zaya tilted her head, her expression questioning. She gestured toward the console, and then to the remains of the harvesters. Alex understood what she was asking without words. "Whoever built those machines, they're still out there," he admitted. "But this signal, it's not just a distress call. It's a warning. If there's anyone out there who can help, they'll come." Zaya's lips pressed into a thin line, her small hands tightening into fists. Alex could see the determination etched into her features. For someone so small, she carried a strength that seemed unshakable. Before either of them could say more, a faint sound echoed through the cavern. It was distant at first, like the whisper of wind, but it grew louder, sharper. Alex's body tensed, his hand instinctively reaching for one of the alien weapons. "Stay behind me," he said, stepping in front of Zia. The sound grew closer, and then, from one of the darkened tunnels, a figure emerged. At first, Alex thought it might be another harvester, but as the figure stepped into the light, his breath caught. It was humanoid, but unlike anything he had ever seen. Its tall frame was clad in sleek armor that shimmered with a strange, iridescent light, and its face was obscured by a helmet with a single glowing blue visor. The figure paused, surveying the scene. Alex raised his weapon cautiously, unsure of its intentions. Beside him, Zaya let out a soft gasp, her glowing eyes wide with recognition. She stepped forward, her small hands raised in what seemed to be a gesture of peace. "Wait," Alex said, reaching for her arm, but she shook her head firmly. The armored figure tilted its head, its movements deliberate and precise. It reached up and removed its helmet, revealing a face that was both alien and familiar. Its features were angular, its skin a deep shade of bronze, and its eyes glowed faintly, much like Zaya's. Alex realized with a start that this was one of her people, or at least someone who shared a connection with her kind. The figure spoke, its voice low and resonant. Alex couldn't understand the words, but Zaya responded quickly, her tone urgent but respectful. The exchange between them was rapid, and Alex could only watch as the tension between them seemed to ease. The figure nodded and looked at Alex, its gaze piercing, but not hostile. Zaya turned to Alex, her expression softening. She gestured to the figure, then to herself, and then to the console. "Help," she said in a small but clear voice. Alex's shoulders relaxed slightly. "They're here to help." Zaya nodded, her glowing eyes bright with hope. The armored figure stepped forward and extended a hand toward Alex. For a moment, Alex hesitated, the weight of mistrust lingering in his mind. But then he remembered Zaya's courage, her willingness to trust him despite her fear. Slowly, he reached out and clasped the figure's hand. "Thank you," Alex said, even though he knew the words might not be understood. The figure nodded and gestured for Alex and Zaya to follow. Together, they moved back toward the console, where the armored figure began examining the system. It worked quickly, its hands moving with practiced precision as it interfaced with the alien technology. The console's hum grew louder, its glow intensifying as the signal was amplified. As the figure worked, Zaya stood beside Alex, her small hand reaching for his. Alex glanced down, surprised, but he didn't pull away. Her touch was light but steady, a silent gesture of gratitude and trust. Minutes later, the figure stepped back from the console, its task complete. A beam of light shot upward from the device, piercing through the cavern ceiling and into the sky above. The light pulsed rhythmically, a beacon that would be impossible to miss. The armored figure turned to Alex and Zaya, speaking in its strange melodic language. Zaya translated as best as she could with gestures, but the message was clear. Help was on its way. They had succeeded in alerting the wider galaxy to the danger of the harvesters and the resilience of those who stood against them. For the first time since Alex had crash-landed on this planet, he felt a sense of relief. The fight wasn't over, but they had taken a crucial step toward something greater. Together, they had not only survived but forged a connection that transcended fear and mistrust. As the three of them stood beneath the glowing beacon, Alex looked down at Zaya and smiled. "We're going to be okay," he said. Zaya nodded, her glowing eyes shining with tears of gratitude. She squeezed his hand lightly, and for the first time, Alex felt the weight of hope, a hope that stretched beyond the stars.